The following is a production of Salt and Light Radio in Boise, Idaho. Kick off your work boots and pull up a boulder. It's time for Man Cave, discussing the issues that affect Catholic men in today's culture. Grab your favorite beverage, pick out a comfy spot around the campfire, and enjoy today's conversation with our two favorite cavemen, Pat King and Brian Howe.
Welcome to Pat King's Man Cave, and this is Pat King, and I've got a guest host tonight with me, David Fortin, from way back out east in the Connecticut Frontlands or Forwardlands or whatever those lands are called over there. They're part of the original 13 colonies, though, right?
Yeah. Original
well,
13 colonies.
So he's old. He's been there a long time. So. Yeah, so today we're going to talk about a few things that are kind of currently happening in our society culturally. And Dave and I and Eddie and I and a lot of other men have talked about this, but I think we can have multiple podcasts on this one subject because it's getting absurd out there. And it's really about the current culture. What we want to talk about is the violence in the culture, the shooting of schools, the not taking up responsibility, men's leadership not being the guards, the protectors of their society, but this recent shooting in Nashville, Tennessee, with the transgender woman going in there and shooting up a Christian school, I've had enough of it myself. David, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely, Pat. And I first let me just begin by saying, Pat, I know that you lost a son, but my heart goes out to these families that have lost children to the senseless, absolutely senseless, behavior that some people are perpetrating on us. It's horrible.
Well, and that's, I guess you mentioned in our little pre-interview talking before the show started, I use the phrase, the devil made me do it. Because the devil is the one that's causing all this chaos, and he does it through deceitfulness. But David mentioned that the devil made me do it slogan or cliche came from Connecticut. And see, they're the whole.
It was actually a legal defense.
Legal defense. Oh, really?
It was a legal defense. Yeah, and it was actually created. Ed and Lorraine Warren. I don't know if you've ever heard of them.
No.
They're paranormal investigators. They've since passed. They're traditional Catholics. They actually kind of worked with the attorney, and the whole devil made me do it. Defense was born.
Wow. Well, but the thing is, the devil's not making anybody do anything, but what he is doing out there, he's making his presence very well known right now, is he is throwing out this confusion, this chaotic mess of getting people to lie. There's a great book by Father Dwight Longenecker called The Immortal Combat. And I really think everybody should read that book, because as you go through that book, the first 10 chapters are on how the devil, all the different mythological devils out there, the different monsters that have been used through all the centuries of pagan life and all that stuff. Then it goes into explaining the different realms of hell, and uses Dante's Inferno a lot to explain it. And so it really opened my eyes to a lot of what's going on out there in our current society, and the people of authority that are supposed to be telling you the truth are actually out there spinning the lie, and the liars, the media, the current president, his press secretary, anybody that's not telling you the truth. And truth is objective. It's not my truth and your truth. There is a truth. And what's happening is you've got so many people that are adults that are pushing out that agenda of like there's more than two genders. You can choose your own gender. You can choose to have an abortion. It's okay. It's perfectly right. It's a right. You can choose to whack off your bosoms or your genitals, and you could be the different person that you feel like you want to be. And they're being lied to, and it's causing all sorts of mental distortion to the point where you got a young lady, what was she, 23 years old, went into this Christian school and killed 6 people and actually had no remorse. And didn't she get killed herself in the process? So 6 total and herself.
She was killed.
And the thing is, from what I've heard, that she actually scoped out 2 different places, but because one had far more security than the school did, she chose to go to the Christian school instead and shoot it up because she did not want to have to deal with the security that she was going to have to face. She wanted to kill no matter what. She wanted to kill and hurt people randomly. She didn't give a dang, didn't care at all. And that, my friend, is the working of the devil, because that woman was confused. Her whole life was a mess. And she was lied to because adults in the room lied to her. And it's really not her fault in some ways. Yes, she pulled the trigger. The gun didn't do it, but she did. But what led up to where she got to that point where she's changing her own sex and believing that she can be her own God?
Exactly right. I just, on my own show along the way, Pat, I just interviewed Bishop Alphonsus Conan from Ireland, and we did talk about relativism.
He's actually in Ireland. He's in Ireland now.
He's the bishop of Waterford and Lismore.
Wow,
wonderful. Yeah, we had a wonderful conversation with him, and the question I asked him, and I've been wanting to ask him this for the longest time, was what is truth? And we got into a lot of what you're saying, about truth being subjective. There's and we talk relativism. Relativism is really, really tearing this society apart because we don't have a common benchmark that we all subscribe to. It's not good.
Well, it's one of the things that very simple, basic thing. I live out on a very country road across the street from a dairy. I have 5 acres. I'm surrounded by acreage of farmland and dairy land. And I have a fast road. It's a 50-mile-an-hour road because it's a kind of a main thoroughfare through the area. And so it gets traveled by quite a bit because it's kind of a shortcut from one section to another. But country roads are, mile-long blocks or longer in between stops and stuff like that. So you just can't go straight. You have to go around farmland and all that stuff. Anyway, I have a 700-foot long frontage on the road. My property is more deep than it is wide, but on that busy road, I have 700 feet from fence marker to fence marker. And I have to go out a couple, 3, 4 times a year and pick up all the trash that's on my road. And it's not like a cigarette butt or a candy wrapper. It's diapers. It's someone's Red Bull can. It's someone's lunch, McDonald's lunch bag that's thrown out there. It's Cole and Copenhagen and all that stuff. I find all this litter on my property, and it's 6, 7 feet, because then they drive by, they can flip it quite a ways and it'll go into my property. And I got cows that graze right up to it. So I got to pick up the trash, the plastic bags and all. I don't want them eating all that stuff. And I sit back and I think about this often because I talk about it with other people, and I'm going, one of the things that's transpired in our education in our schools, public schools, in the last 30, 40 years, is they've really pushed the agenda environmentalism. Okay. And be good stewards of the land and all that stuff. But they're teaching this as you got to do it because we're killing the planet. Okay. not because it's the right thing to do, not because there's a higher power watching over you, someone you're going to have to be accountable to in the future. They're saying it is, well, if you don't do your job, we're going to kill the planet. Well, you know how people think, well, like my vote doesn't count because I'm just one person out of millions, so why should I go vote? Well, I think, and I believe in my whole heart, this is what they think. My little trash won't hurt anybody. I'm just one out of, everybody else can clean up, but my little bit of trash is insignificant. And there's no one watching me do it anyway. So what the heck? So they throw it out the window. Every time if I think I'm going to throw something out the window because the window's open, summertime, I'm driving 60 miles an hour, getting somewhere, and I might go throw something out, I can only just already feel my mom's backhanding me, slapping me upside the head, saying, "Don't you dare throw that out the window. If you do, you're going to have to go back and pick it up." And I remember one time when I was a kid, she slammed the brakes on. She made me get out of the car, go back and pick up something that I threw because I threw it out the window. But she didn't stop. I mean, she slapped me in the process too. But her attitude was, no, God is watching you. Okay. I didn't have the fear of God punishing me, but I had the fear that God was watching me and keeping track of my behavior. Okay. So I became accountable to God. I was taught that he's always watching you, no matter what you think or what you say or what you do. These kids nowadays, they're not taught that a higher power is watching them. They're trying to tell them, you better do it or else. They're putting a different kind of fear into them, not a fear that's accountable, not the good and healthy fear of God's presence. Okay.
You're absolutely right, Pat. Absolutely right. Because there's, to me, you see a lot of these people that are jumping onto these causes, and it's a false empathy that I think a lot of people have today. And it's, get, like you say, they don't think that somebody's watching, but that we know as Catholics, we know that God is always watching. And today it seems like people, if they think they can get away with it, they'll try to.
Right. But okay, I'm sure you heard this growing up too from your own mother, but she knew her kids. My mom knew her kids. She had 7 kids. She knew what we would do. She would say, "Don't you do that. How'd you see me? I've got eyes in the back of my head." It's that one of those things. But we were taught that someone greater than us was watching over our behavior. And we had to be a responsible. And as men, are we teaching that to our kids? Is the mention of God or Jesus in your daily lexicon when talking to your kids? And I think for the most part in America, I think not. I don't think we talk about God or Jesus. I don't think, or else why would parents let their kids go to drag queen story hour at the library? What woman, what husband is saying it's okay for my wife to take our kids to drag queen story hour? What the hell what the hell's going on, man? What is your problem? Right. Why are you not taking the reins of the family? And you don't have to you just need to be leadership. It needs to be godly leadership. And this wouldn't happen if you had this conversation with your wife and with your children. And you need to step up by being a man of faith, a man of God, one that goes to church, that makes the family go to church. This wouldn't happen if men were stepping up. I'm getting riled up.
What does it mean
Sorry about
to step up, though? No, I know you are. I know you are, buddy. I know you are. But what does it mean to step up? I mean, you can say all these things. You can bring Jesus into the conversation at home, but I mean,
well, stepping up is
in
example.
the end. What does it mean? Okay. Yep.
Well, okay, great example. I said this before, and I like using it because it actually came up in the middle of a conversation, a podcast that Eddie Trask and I were doing for the Man Cave Show. And I said, we were just talking, and this came up, and I said, and I struggled with being a man. And this doesn't come from a guy that I've been this warrior man all my life. I was a macho man, maybe even what the definition of toxic masculinity would be today by some women, because I didn't know how to tone my manhood down and be the right form of manhood, the leadership. I was kind of a ogre type man that I'd lorded over people because I knew I was right, and by golly, I'm going to browbeat it into you. That was me growing up. And the reason why I was like that is because I didn't have a father in my life. I say this all the time, that my mother was the best father she was the worst father I had, but the only one I had. She was the worst father, but the best one I had. And that's because my father wasn't in the picture. I had an uncle that helped out, that kind of was partly of that role. And I have tremendous respect for my uncle. My grandfather did a lot. What I know about landscaping and gardening and nursery came from a summer I spent at my grandparents' house, where they made me work for my food. I mean, I'm 12 years old, and I had to work for my food. And it wasn't in a bad way. It was, this is a family business. If you want to eat, you got to help out. You got to work. Everybody helps out with the family to make it happen. But my grandfather was he didn't sit there and instruct me and put me in a chair and make me take tests or anything like that. He just showed me by example. He let you see him as he was in real life as a man. He was very respectful of his wife. He loved going to mass. He loved saying the rosary every night before bed. He was a soft-spoken man, but boy, I tell you, he spoke volumes by his actions. He read the Bible. He was kind and generous to everybody he came across. Very gleeful, very joyful, happy to meet people. He gave of his time to other people when they needed it. I never saw that man, angry in a way that would be like, ooh, scared me, anger. He'd get, like, okay, no, you can't do that. I told you not to do that. But he also let us learn on our own mistakes. He goes, now, see what I tell you, it's kind of like the stove is hot. It don't touch, Yeah. So that's what I mean by setting the example, by taking the leadership, being loving and kind to your wife in front of your children. If you have a discussion that you need to make that can be argumentative, don't do it in front of your kids. My wife and I fought all the time in front of our kids. Was not good. Okay. Yeah. It does not bode well for the man to argue and treat his wife poorly in front of their children. Yeah. But there's a lot of things that men can do to take the bull by the horns and be the leader. But it first means going to church and reading your Bible, letting your kids see you do that.
I love the way you just broke up being a man into many different ways that we can be, because so often you'll hear of, the man's supposed to be a warrior. There's always that warrior mentality that gets pushed on men, and we don't have to be a warrior in every facet of our life. It's like sometimes we need to be tender with our children. We need to, we're not going to treat our daughters the same way we treat our sons. Right. At times we need to be gentle with our wives. At times we need to be forceful with, strangers. Sometimes, we as men need to be in the moment and serve the moment appropriately.
Right. Well, I was with raising my children. I never had to swat them. I mean, maybe a couple times to know that they, when I said not to do something and they did it, was more to like slap their hand for reaching up on a hot stove and I told them not to touch it, that type of thing. It was never a beating or anything like that. Okay, I don't want my mom's passed, so no one's going to turn her in. But I mean, my goodness, we got the belt from our dad. When my parents were together, my mom would say, "Wait till your father comes home," and then
Yeah.
dad had no problem whipping his belt off and giving us a good spanking or two. But 7
Mhm.
kids, we all deserved it, and none of us. I don't have anything against the spank. I just didn't have to do that with my children because I had a stern way with them if I needed to be, and they knew I meant business by just the body language and the look. I mean, I got that Italian look, I guess. I look at my kids, but my father, my mom, she used to spank us, and
Mhm.
for the longest time she'd always say, "Well, this is going to hurt me more than it's going to hurt you," and it's like, "Oh, well, your bottle's not getting beaten, but mine is," and
Mhm.
it she was right though. In the long time, because I understand, like, Jesus is hurt when we hurt him, when we sin. Okay,
Mhm.
we've offended Jesus by doing something knowingly is sinful in our behavior, our actions, and things we do or say, and he wants nothing more for you than to come back to him and seek forgiveness and reparations for that broken relationship. And our moms were the same, our parents were the same way. And I think that
Yeah.
we've gone too far the other way where we don't spank our kids because we aren't letting them know there's a punishment for their behavior and their actions, to where then we can then be gentle and soft and receptive of their, "I'm sorry, mom. I'm sorry, dad." You know, we aren't teaching them there are boundaries for behavior and actions. And that's so definitely so wrong for our current society.
Yeah. Do you think that the media is complicit in
Oh,
the hyper violence
absolutely.
of our society?
Absolutely.
I've often thought that
100%.
because you have all these Hollywood actors and stuff that are out there, saying that, we should have stronger gun laws and all, all this stuff. And yet they're out there making these hyper violent movies.
I own 5 guns. Okay. Different rifles,
Mm-hmm.
pistols, handguns. I got a Clint Eastwood make my day kind of revolver. It's fun to shoot. Man's
Mm-hmm.
got a heck of a kick. It's a 6 shooter. But I have nice thing about living where I live. I live out in I can walk about 50 feet. I get a little further away, but 75 feet away from my house into some backwoods area where there's a ditch bank and a bunch of old trees and stuff and a wash, and I can shoot all day long and have price of
Mm-hmm.
ammunition though, and the scarcity. I don't shoot as much as I used to. But let me tell you something. They only work when I'm holding them in my hand and I'm using them.
Yeah.
For the last 8-9 months since the last time I shot last summer, they've done nothing. They just sit there. They're just a hunk of metal and plastic, handle grips. That's it. They
Yeah.
sit in their case.
Yep.
A bullet doesn't jump into the chamber and go, "Oh, baby, let's launch this baby off." No, it's only done by
Yeah.
human beings. But here's what happens. When you get the celebrities and the media to say it's the gun's fault, the gun shot the
Mm-hmm.
person, or the SUV drove through a crowd and hit people. No, the idiot behind the SUV, the idiot holding the gun, pointing it at somebody with the intent to do harm is the problem. He's the one that did the deed. The gun had nothing to do with it. The gun was just a tool.
Yep.
You can hurt someone just as bad with a baseball bat over the head as you can a golf club or a knife or a hammer or a. Trust me, if you saw some of my pipe wrenches, they could do some pretty good damage if I held them up and
Sure.
used them as a club. And we've been killing people for centuries with tools that are both good and bad. Okay.
Mhm.
A hammer is a great tool for driving a nail into a piece of wood or punching through some drywall to tear out a wall. But it also is very bad if it used to hit over someone's head because it can do quite a bit of damage to someone's brain.
Yeah. A lot of the martial arts weapons are all agricultural weapons
That's
or
right.
agricultural tools.
Well, if you read the
So,
Bible, it talks about we want to turn our swords and our knives into plowshares and hoes,
yep.
because that's God's ultimate goal, is to bring that kind of a peace that all we're doing is gardening. You
Mhm.
know, we're not taking arms
Mhm.
against someone else. So yeah, when
Right.
the media comes out and blames, you got President Biden, and he makes his comment. He makes his comment about, um, well, we need to get rid of the AR-15, the assault rifles, because that's what killed those kids. No, it was in the hands of a woman who was mentally disturbed and confused because adults in her life screwed her over and made a mess of her life. And that's where this current violence comes from, is from adult. You know,
Yep.
I don't know. You're what, 57? How old are you?
58.
58.
58.
You look younger than 58. Not by much.
I know. Thank you. Not by much, but
Okay, so I don't know about you, but I grew up in Idaho. Okay,
mhm.
and I don't know what grade it was, third or fourth grade, one of those grades, fifth, sixth grade. I don't remember. I just remember through elementary school, we went to a shooting range, and we all got to
Mhm.
learn to shoot. We had a week's worth of Idaho Fish and Game came to our classroom and instructed us on the proper use of guns and permitting, licensing, getting licenses for fishing and hunting in the seasons and all this stuff, and the process of doing that. We got to be fifth. It must have been fifth or sixth grade. Anyway, so here we are. We're after the week of training. Now we get to go shoot guns at a rifle and we got to shoot these 22 rifles laying on our bellies. All these kids, girls, boys, everybody shooting guns, and no one got hurt.
Mhm.
We were all taught proper gun safety, how to handle a gun, how to load a gun, how to fire a gun, how to aim at a target, how to handle it safely. You never walk around with a loaded
Mhm.
gun, all this stuff. Okay. And then when I moved from California to Idaho, I did live in California I can't help what my parents did. They didn't move and not tell me. I went with them. So I was born in
Uh-huh.
Iowa, ended up in Houston, and then Southern California, and then in Idaho. And when we first moved to Idaho, everyone drives a truck in Idaho. I mean, it's just a standard issues truck. Well, in my day, everybody had gun racks in the back of their trucks, and they had,
Yep.
I think, usually there were 2 or 3 little slots to hold a couple 3 rifles. Okay, and
Mhm.
I thought when you bought a truck in Idaho, it came standard issue to have a gun rack in the back of your truck, and there were guns in it all the time. You can clearly see them
Mhm.
in the high school parking lot growing up at Twin Falls High. You go through the parking lot, and every truck, you look in every truck, there was a rifle in the gun rack at school in the school parking lot. Yet, no mass school shooting, nothing. In fact,
Yeah.
when I had time during pheasant hunting season, I walked. I lived 2 blocks until I got a car. I only lived about 2.5, 3 blocks away from the high school. A little further than that, but anyway, it didn't seem long for me. But I walked to Twin Falls High, and I'd be carrying a gun, my shotgun, over my shoulder, shotgun shells in my pockets, walking to school, walking through the school, walking on the street, walking through a shopping center parking lot and all this stuff, just walking around. Not a single cop came running. Oh my gosh, he's walking around with a gun. I'm 17, 16, 17 years old. It just everywhere you went. You didn't even think about it. And I walked through and I'm carrying the gun because my friends and I were going to go pheasant hunting on the way home. because they had farmland or canals or whatever near the high school. And I'd bring it in the classroom, and the teacher would say, "Well, Mr. King, you know what you're going to do with that one, aren't you?" He says, "Oh yeah, it's going to go in my locker and locked up. It's not loaded, right?" "No, sir, it's not." You know, and they even had a gun club. You know how they have Glee Club, or they had chess club. They had a gun club. They had a rodeo club. They had all this stuff at the high school as a extracurricular after school activity. And no one panicked when they saw a guy walking around with a gun over his shoulder. It was normal.
But Pat, be honest with the audience. Covered wagons were still heading west when you were in high school.
Look, we didn't even have indoor plumbing. We had those wooden we had those wooden outhouses out my house. So
No, but seriously, isn't there? It's a different culture out west than it is here on the East Coast. I mean,
oh yeah, very much so.
I mean, I remember growing up. I lived in a small town in Massachusetts, and the big thing at that time was carrying buck knives on our belt, and our assistant principal would go around every day and collect the ones that he saw, and have to go back and get them at the end of the day. But so I mean, there was that. But really, I mean, what is the culture like in Idaho compared to Connecticut? I mean, you have different wildlife out there, right?
Well, no, we have deer and bears.
Yeah, but don't you have grizzly bears?
Somewhere. I've never encountered them.
No.
Probably up in the higher mountainous elevations, higher elevations. We have a lot of dense forestry that we have what's known as wildlife preserves, where you actually cannot, wilderness areas. You actually cannot drive any motorized vehicle in, and if you do go into them, the rule is pack in, pack out. So whatever you take in, you must bring back out with you. So if you're going in for a couple of days camping, whatever food supplies, whatever waste you're going to take out, other than using the rest, creating a toilet, you don't have to carry out your waste that way. You have to bury it, but you're not supposed to bury trash. So if it's not compostable, if it's not biodegradable materials, then it has to be removed. So, and we have quite a few of those areas around here. The Frank Church wilderness area is an area where it's rather large, and there's no roads, there's no motorized vehicles. There's some trails, but there's no the only way, if you get back there, they got to helicopter you in, or maybe in the wintertime you can snowmobile. I'm not sure, but there's no 4-wheel drive vehicles, no ATV, stuff like that can go back in there. So, but I mean, come on. So we're in Idaho. You may or may not have heard what's going on out west, but in Oregon, the whole eastern side of Oregon, east of the Cascades, is wanting to secede from the state of Oregon to be part of and have their property, their state lines adjusted to become the new territory, well, part of Idaho called the Greater Idaho. It would take up all of eastern, or almost all of eastern Oregon, all the way down the Cascadal Divide, and so I think it's 11 counties in Oregon, and so far about all 11 counties have voted in favor of leaving Oregon, because their whole voting block is on the west coast, all the way down the west coast, from Portland all the way through Salem, Eugene. Though they're highly dense, highly populated, and they've got the populist vote, so it's very liberal, very blue that side. But if you looked at Oregon, it's blue on the west coast, red on the east side of the Cascades, and so Idaho legislature is actually talking about moving in. So they're all hunters, they're all outdoorsmen. I mean, there's a vast amount of outdoors out here. I mean,
shares a similar culture.
Yeah,
to Idaho?
or Eastern Oregon shares a very similar culture, mindset, belief system, very red versus the blue and liberals. Idaho's a very red state, and there's 83,000 square miles of Idaho land, and it's a big state, and it would make it the biggest. I think adding Eastern Oregon would make it the biggest, or not, if not very close to the one of the top 3 or 4 biggest states in the union. And but they share a similar culture, but they're stuck with all the rules. Like, they don't want pot sold and recreational drugs allowed in their cities, and it's because it's harmful to their cities. But because the state has voted it in, it's there. They can't stop it. And so it's really hard. And so they want to end that. They just don't want that. Abortion in Oregon, you can have abortion up until, I think, the day of birth or even beyond. They can have an abortion. In Idaho,
Wow.
if you don't have an abortion you can't have an abortion after 6 weeks of pregnancy. Once Roe versus Wade got booted out, Idaho's trigger law came into effect, and it does not allow abortions after 6 weeks. So
that's definitely a step in the right direction.
Emergencies, yes.
Definitely a step in the right direction.
Yeah. So so where I live in one of the safest states. Okay. When people commit murder, they catch them. Okay. And then they punish them. In fact, our legislature just voted in. Now, being Catholic, it's not a doctrinal thing. And I believe in redemption. I believe that people should have the opportunity to heal their souls, seek forgiveness. But I'm torn between the death penalty. I mean, as long as I knew that they would never, ever get out, I'm fine with not putting them to death. But look what's happened during COVID. All these convicted criminals got let out because of the safety of it, or whatever liberals' excuses were for letting them out of prison before their time. But then I believe that if there's a tendency that they might be innocent, and down the road they can be found innocent, that they were proven innocent, then I'm okay with not executing them right away, whatever. I was very, very much pro death penalty, but that was only because we didn't have great prisons. We weren't able to keep them in, or some judge might throw something out that allowed them back out just to kill again. How many times have you, I hear stories all the time about the murderers being let out of prison or something for this technicality or that, or they've done their time, or some district attorney let them out early or whatever. And all of a sudden, immediately they get out, and within a day of being out, they're killing someone again or hurting someone again. And if they weren't out on the street, that'd never have happened. So
absolutely.
So what is your culture? Like I said, I live in a very safe state. We have very low crime here because everybody in Idaho's got at least 5 guns like me. Don't come robbing from my. I don't take the keys out of my cars, but and people don't know where I live, so they won't. But literally, my skidster has a key in it. My work truck has a key in it. I don't want to be looking for keys when I need to move my truck or something.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I know exactly what you're saying. Now my work truck keys stay right in the ignition, but it's in a garage because the culture here. We're a very small state, and we have a pretty high population. We have a number of bigger cities here, and especially on the East Coast. We have New Haven, Bridgeport, Waterbury, Hartford. These are all pretty good sized cities with high crime rates. So, and we have probably the strongest gun laws, I think, in the country here in Connecticut.
Wow.
Yeah, and
what good
yeah,
does
a
it
lot of
do?
it came from what?
What
Well,
good does it
you
do?
know, nothing. It does, because the gun laws that were in place should have been taken care of, and we might, you know, I remember the day that Sandy Hook happened. Sandy Hook School.
No.
I don't know if you're
Okay.
familiar with that.
Yeah, very much so.
And, yeah, and you know, it was a tragedy. I mean, just to sit there and just to see this horror unfold on the news was just crazy. And but yeah, I mean, our legislators have enacted some really crazy gun laws that you know, now they want to make it here in Connecticut. We can only buy one gun a month. You know, they want to, you know, regulate right down to that. You know,
Right.
And
Well, yeah, when Sandy Hook happened, it got our schools thinking, some of our rural schools.
Mhm.
We've had a couple incidences up in northeastern Idaho. Um, some attempts. There was some school shootings, but they were quickly dealt with.
Mhm.
And then some of these smaller rural communities like Garden Valley and a few other towns, smaller towns. We even have a whole town that there's an ordinance that requires people to have a gun in their home because there's no police. They say you must be able to protect yourself because there is no. It would take 20 minutes for a police officer to get there. It's a very small town. A small town of Green. It's a Quaker town. At least it was originally founded by Quakers. There's a Quaker, the oldest Christian school west of Mississippi is in that town, Greenleaf Friends Academy. But the Greenleaf City folks said, look, we can't afford a police officer, so we have to use the county sheriffs for any of our calls, and they're far away. Now of course they drive the county, but they're still spread out. It's a big county. And so
Yeah.
they're told, look, you need to protect yourself. You got to have a gun. And it's right on. It made national headlines when they voted it into their city ordinances that they have to have they should have they're not required. It's not mandated, but it's highly recommended that they have a gun in their home to protect themselves. You know,
Wow.
and that's a town, a whole town voted that in. So, so yeah, when Sandy Hook happened, a lot of schools talked about it. But did you know, most people don't know this, but every teacher in Israel carries a weapon in classroom.
I did not know that.
Every single teacher.
Now, that's a very militaristic society right there.
Well, but I mean, if you look at how big Israel is and what surrounds Israel and who's trying to kill Israel, the Israelis all the time. Yeah. You know, why wouldn't you do whatever it takes to protect yourself? If they aren't the big kids on the block, everyone's just going to beat the crap out of them. And so, but that's just it. You come up into Idaho, you come up on my property unwanted, you might get met at the door with a shotgun in my hands or something. But see, that's just it. There's so many guns up here. There's so many people that own guns up here that you don't know who owns and who doesn't. And we're also a constitutional carry state. People can open carry, they can conceal carry. They don't have to have a permit for either one of them. We have people walking around in public squares like the State House and stuff with guns. You know, we went to on our March for Life rally. There was at least a half a dozen guys that were carrying AR-15s or other weaponry on them. And you know, I'm blind in one eye, so I prefer to keep my shooting to just more target practice and possible hunting for birds and stuff. I don't want to take that issue because I have a terrible depth perception and I'm not as accurate as I used to be when I had both eyes working. So shooting is just not as fun for me as it used to be. But I'm also a pretty big guy and I'm loud, so I can scare people into submission just by yelling at them a lot of times. But Also, I'm not afraid to defend myself, but it, but it felt nice. And this guy's just walking on a public street with the cop escort, beside us, and he's got his AR-15 sitting there on his, across his chest with a 9mm on his hip, and we weren't bothered by anybody. Let me tell you, and because Idaho, when COVID hit, it was, you're all adults. It's, pretty much. Now the city of Boise shut down pretty good, and because it's run by a very liberal mayor, and she, and city of Boise's on a very liberal. That's the capital, and it's pretty liberal in the majority of the population is pretty liberal in there, but it's not the whole state, and it's not a huge effect. And the thing was, they shut down a lot of restaurants and bars in Boise for COVID, but they all came out to Canyon County, to my cities, to eat in my bars and restaurants. And it made our bars and restaurants so busy, I couldn't even get into my own bar and restaurant that I like going to. I was bummed, but we're getting a little off topic here on the culture. The culture out here is one of, for the most part, normalcy. Yes, we have the cross gender, the LGBTQ stuff. Yes, we have pride parades. Yes, we have all that in the city of Boise. It's not welcomed in most cities outside of Boise.
Well, how do you deal with that?
I don't go into Boise.
Just tell. Okay.
We're trying to. Well, so our state legislature passed laws that prevents taxpayer funds to sponsor those types of activities. Okay, so they can no longer be putting on, and there's an event that the LGBT community wants to put on. The health and welfare department can't sponsor it. State funds are not allowed to be used. Taxpayer dollars are not allowed to be used to sponsor events that go against norms of our society, because we didn't get any money for our pro-life march from the health and welfare department, but they sure gave money to the pride group for their pride parade. And so if they're not going to support pro-life, they should be supporting LGBTQ on the side.
No, exactly right.
Yeah, so they just passed a law, and I was going to tell you. So we, one of the things the state just did, because of we use a cocktail of drugs to execute someone, and because it's getting harder to get those drugs, they just reinstituted
Don't say firing squad.
Firing squad.
Really?
Yeah, they're bringing back the firing squad. You know how a firing squad works, right?
Yeah.
There's 6 or 7 men with guns. Everybody but one has
got a bullet.
Well, they all have bullets. They're blanks.
Oh yeah, you're right.
They're all blanks except for one, and no one knows who's got the one. And they're all marksmen. They all know how to shoot at the heart, and they all take aim at the heart. And they got to build a special room because it can be viewed. But I really think, the reason why they did public hangings and public executions, that's the best way to curtail those activities that lead to public executions.
See, I am not for the death penalty at all.
I agree. But what I'm getting at is that just punishment. Take the execution off the table. What I'm saying is, if someone rapes someone, they should be put away for life. Okay, there shouldn't be any chance of them able to fix their life and be rehabilitated and released out on, because unless it was she's 17 and I'm 18, the legal age thing. I'm talking about forcible, violent, terrible rape, that type of thing. But we pretty much, our prisons, our laws are pretty well established that if you do a crime, commit a crime, a heinous crime or whatever, they're punished appropriately. And very rarely they get off early for good behavior. Okay. It's the punishment does fit the crime. And then it's swift. The judgment is swift. I don't know if you're familiar with Lori Vallow, Daybell.
Nope.
Okay, you should look it up. It made a lot of national headlines. They killed their own kids. They're this outside this the Mormon sect. This weird.
Yeah, I do know. Yeah, I did hear about that.
Well, they're trying to fight the execution. That was, I mean, come on, that was absolutely awful what they did, and they did the killing of their kids all under the eyes of the public awareness of all this was going on, because they were already being scrutinized for some of the things that were taking place. And then all of a sudden these kids went missing during the process, and then they found them. It's like, this is just weird. It's mentally disturbed people. I trust, boy, that was just awful, and to have this in our,
Yeah, that's a common theme that you've been bringing up a lot tonight as we talk, is that mental illness. And mental illness, to me, and for a lot of mental health professionals will agree that it's a disordered thinking, and we need to get back to that right ordered of thinking, and need that benchmark of not relativism.
Right. Well, and there's a, and I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a doctor, but I can tell you from now, there's true mental illness, and there's people that are spiritually disturbed. They have no guidance from God. They don't look to God. They've been lied to about the existence of God, and their happiness depends on their choice and all that. So they're mentally affected, but it's because they lack any spiritual belief, understanding. And I think when you take that element of God out of the picture, you take away hope, you take away someone else watching over you, someone paying attention to your behavior, your activities, someone who loves you, who created you. Now they think there's no one. I'm it. It's just all about me. They're when you start factoring, you take that away, when you take that element of you're a child of God, and now you have to think for yourself about everything, and your feelings are what matter. You're starting to, I think you can nip mental illness in the bud if God is in the picture, a healthy understanding of God in the picture, not a punishing God, not a God that wants to put you to hell, but a truthful understanding of God in relationship. I don't think we'll have the mental issues that we have, the confusion of their sex and who they are, their ideas. I personally believe that they would not, because I didn't grow up with a lot of LGBT. That was not the lexicon. Were there gay people? Yes, there have always been homosexual tendencies. Sure. Okay. Yep. That's why Jesus talks about it in the Bible. That's why it was brought up in the Old Testament. Okay. So that part of it, but it was not a significant amount. You've seen the numbers escalate. Okay, so why? Because they believe God made a mistake? That's the first problem. They think God made a mistake. I was created in a boy's body, but I really want to be a girl. So they're already saying God made a mistake. So then if then you get an adult that continues to exacerbate that thought, and then make steps to help them get the health care they need to correct that mistake, they're now being told that God didn't really do this. He there is no God. You were just born in the wrong body. And how is that possible if there was a God? Right? So either God made a mistake or someone else is just lying to you. And that lying is the mental problem. It's a spiritual problem and it's a mental problem. And again, I'm not a doctor.
But you think about it, Pat, the first disordered thinking that came was when Adam and Eve in the garden thought they would become like God by believing the lies that,
right,
the devil told to them.
And this is a tool that the devil has no ability to make you do anything, but he sure has a slick tongue. He sure knows how to convince people, that he knows how to utilize their emotions to trick them, to persuade them. He uses persuasion, deceit, lies. He knows the Bible very well, so he knows how to turn the Bible verses around. That's why they always, what do Catholics always tell you about when you use a verse to defend something or to approve, like this is okay because this verse says this? What do they always tell you? Read the whole paragraph. Read the lines before it and the lines that follow. Read the whole thing so that you don't take a verse out of context. Okay? Because it happens. Even Christians, even so-called really good Christians will take a verse saying, oh yeah, God's for abortion. Oh, what?
Yeah, you're right. Yep. No, you can, I remember the Pentecostal church, they used Acts 2:38, which said, be baptized in the name of Jesus Christ for the remission of sins. Well, there's other scriptures that tell about being baptized in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. So you're right. You got to you can't take just the pieces that you want. You got to look at scripture in the context and read it appropriately.
Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Man Cave, a weekly podcast discussing the issues that affect Catholic men in today's culture. A production of Salt and Light Radio in Boise, Idaho. To learn more about our ministry, please visit our website, saltandlightradio.com.